Hello and welcome to this special Frontline webinar on the situation between India and Pakistan and what happens next. I'm your host, Amit Baruah. Ever since the Pahalgam terrorist attack, the barbaric terrorist attack that killed 26 innocents in Pahalgam, the situation between India and Pakistan has been tense. Ever since that day, it was expected that India will hit back. And hit back it did on the night of May 6th and 7th, when missile strikes were launched at 9 sites in Pakistan, killing, as the defense minister said, 100 terrorists. More importantly, in Bahawalpur, it's been confirmed by people there that as many as 14 terrorists were killed, which includes relatives of the wanted Jaish-e-Mohammed leader, Masood Azhar. Since then, India and Pakistan, for 4 days, from that night of May 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and then the exchanges that happened, the tension, we finally had a cessation of hostilities, a ceasefire, an understanding to end all firing on land, sea, and air, as Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri put it in his briefing. Common people, ordinary people on both sides of the international border and the line of control are probably breathing a sigh of relief. How did it all happen suddenly? That something which appeared to be spiraling, suddenly there was a ceasefire, an announcement from none other than US President Donald Trump that India and Pakistan had agreed to see reason and that there would be a cessation of hostilities. So to discuss this, I'm joined by two very distinguished guests. We have from Srinagar, Gowhar Geelani, independent journalist who is a contributor for Frontline. He has a keen eye on what goes on in the region. And from Chandigarh, I'm joined by veteran journalist, defense analyst, and sometime correspondent for Jane's Defense Weekly, and a regular writer on defense matters, that is Rahul Bedi. He joins us from Chandigarh. So I'm now first going to go to Rahul and ask him, what happened? How come suddenly this matter de-escalated and we have an agreement between the DGMOs that they're going to stop all firing? And it seems that overnight the ceasefire has held, though there were instances last night where it appeared that there had been violations, and Indian Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri again spoke about it. So how do you see this, Rahul, the escalation and then the de-escalation? How do you see things now?
Well, I think this was a collective effort, not only by the US, but it was also an effort by the Saudi Arabians, as well as to some extent by the Chinese, because the brother of Pakistan's Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif's brother, Nawaz Sharif, has very good relations with the Saudis. And soon after these hostilities broke out, it's reported that he went to Saudi Arabia. He has old associations there. In fact, when he was exiled many years ago, he went to Saudi Arabia, and if I'm not mistaken, I think his wife also passed away in Saudi Arabia. So he got the Saudis to intervene on both sides of the line of control, India and Pakistan.
You're referring to the visit by the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, the Saudi Arabian Minister of State.
That's right. That's right. Secondly, the Chinese, who are very big players in this whole matrix, because of their close association with Pakistan and because of their economic interdependence on Pakistan, they also issued very strong statements because they are not in favor of any conflict. But the major role, of course, was played by the US State Department and the US government, because things had been heading for a very catastrophic scale. And there were reports in Reuters which were later denied that the Pakistani National Command Authority, which looks after their nuclear weapons, was meeting on Saturday morning. So I think everybody got alarmed, and there was a lot of toing and froing, resulting in this cessation of hostilities that were announced by the Indian Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri. So all in all, there was relief on both sides of the border. And even if I may presume to say so, I think both sides were looking for an out in this conflict, and both sides were given this out, and they grabbed it, and there's relief on either side of the border.
You referred to the US role and the Saudi role. We'll come to the Saudi role in a bit. But interestingly, what Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, said in his tweet, and he made a couple of points that, Vice President Vance and he himself, that is Rubio, spoke to a number of Indian and Pakistani leaders, and critical among them were Prime Minister Modi. And I think on the Pakistani side, the army chief, the chief of army staff, Asim Munir, in which it would appear that later reports, news reports tell us that probably Vance spoke to Mr. Modi, and Rubio spoke to Asim Munir, and there were lots of conversations with NSA Doval and the ISI chief on the other side. And interestingly, the other point in the tweet is, apart from a immediate cessation of hostilities, is that India and Pakistan would meet at a neutral site to discuss a wide range of issues. Now, what does this mean, Rahul? That we have committed to meeting at a third place. Whether or not the meeting happens is another matter. But this commitment, you think this is something which the Pakistanis were able to extract? Because if you remember, Rahul, when the climb down happened in Kargil, at that time, there was an agreement between the Pakistanis and Bill Clinton, that is Nawaz Sharif and Bill Clinton, that the Kashmir issue would be discussed and that Clinton would take a personal interest in discussing this. How do you see this neutral venue and this broad range of issues that are to be talked about?
Well, I think the devil lies in the detail. And I think if you really look at Vikram Misri's statement, it makes absolutely no mention of US intervention. And Misri also very categorically said that there were going to be no talks. Because if you, look back on history over the last almost 80 years, India has not wanted any third-party intervention in Kashmir. And that is what the Simla Agreement in 1972 was all about. So I think the Pakistanis have very cleverly managed to insert this into the statement. India has rejected the concept of all talks for the simple reason that it says that first Pakistan has to give adequate declarations that it will not sponsor terrorism like the attack at Pahalgam.
And interestingly, the tweet has no reference, Rubio's tweet has no reference to terrorism at all.
None. And that's very clever and very cunning on Pakistan's part, because they sort of seem to have, I wouldn't say endorsed, but at least overlooked the terrorism side of things. And India is well within its rights to feel a little peeved that there is no reference to that. So I think I'm a little skeptical about talks. It's quite possible they may take place. But I think India is very cautious on the talk side of things. And I think now diplomacy and telephone lines will be activated on both sides, on not only in Islamabad and Delhi, but also between Washington, Islamabad, Washington and Delhi, to see what next happens in this saga. But for the moment, there is relief in both capitals that the crisis has been, for the moment at least, neutralized.
Right. I'm going to bring in Gowhar Geelani, who joins us from Srinagar. Gowhar, we've been seeing your reports from Srinagar. But what I wanted to ask you, in the last 4 days, ever since the Indian strikes happened, what's been the mood among the people of Kashmir, the people who you interact with? Was there a fear that this is going to break into a larger conflict? Or was there a sense, as many people believe, that, the US holds, the game in hand, and in a sense, it can maneuver and manipulate things to the kind of conclusion that we did see yesterday?
Thank you very much, Amit, and good morning, Rahul. So you have covered Kashmir, so you understand the pulse here. Your reporting on Kashmir has been for many, many years. And see, the people, ordinary citizen in Kashmir is very politically conscious, and they always talk about, when this happened, because this was perhaps the first drone war between the arch rivals, the nuclear powers, and this escalation, made people fearful about a larger, catastrophic repercussions, that how where could this lead to. So this was one, there was fear. Second, there was uncertainty among people that what happens next, and they also understood that this was perhaps much bigger than they could have imagined, in terms of that how, there's a saying in Kashmir, where they say that jang mein sabse zyada nuksan maidani jang ka hota hai, that in a battle, the most of the damage takes place to the battlefield. In this case, which means the civilians living on either side of the line of control, or even at the international border. So you saw that how, when the shelling happened on either side, and Uri, for example, in North Kashmir's Baramulla, and then you had shelling from the Poonch area, and latest in Rajouri, where one of the additional DCs, Mr. Thapa, was killed, and his staff members were injured. So this was the brunt was borne by the people in Kashmir, civilians on either side. So that's why the fear was that everything what happens at the larger scale, it's kind of, the victim will be a common citizen living on either side of the line of control. So that was fair. And then the migration sort of happened when people started taking shelter in other areas, and the most of the damage happened in the Poonch area. But then the conflict sort of went out of control when the drone strikes started taking place, and then the military targets were hit on either side. So that's when people did not have any clue that whether it was, some were saying, like if you spoke to a butcher or a baker outside, and they would say this is on one scale, this is a war between India and Pakistan, but on another scale it is perhaps a bigger game between China and the US. So that's how people started weighing in the geopolitical. They started seeing it from a geopolitical lens, but at the core of it, the fear was about what happens to the battlefield, that is Kashmir.
And would you say there's a sense of relief? I mean, what are your friends, your family, what are they telling you today? Is there a sense of
There,
relief that
there
this
is
has been contained where it has?
absolute relief, because once the announcement was made, and it came to, came to public that the Americans have intervened, and then there is a ceasefire. So soon after, you saw, because after these blackouts for many nights, 4 5 nights where you have absolute blackouts during the evenings, and there's a lot of noise going on, the jets flying over, the drones, and the strikes and explosions, big explosions. And you also woke up to the explosion at 5:44 a.m. the other
Did you
day.
sleep
So,
peacefully last night, Gowhar?
yeah,
Were you able to sleep
I
peacefully?
did not, because journalists never speak peacefully, because then they analyze what
Because
happened. But
they're worried why the sound is missing. Is that the reason?
I mean, for many people who have seen the violence of the 90s also, I mean, it's not something new to them. But the new aspect was, as I said, the drone. Because they had never seen drones. This new war, where technology was used, where the dog fights happened. So that was something very scary for people. But there was absolute relief. I spoke to people in Jammu. I have a lot of friends there in Jammu, media fraternity. So they heaved a sigh of relief, especially people living in Poonch, Rajouri, Uri, and Tangdar in Kupwara, where there's not a lot of stories have been done on Tangdar and Kupwara. Focus was on Rajouri and Poonch and Uri. But now there is a sigh of relief, and every politician, the unionist camp, has welcomed the ceasefire, and there was this demand from the ground that there should be some mechanism to find pathways, the path ahead. There's a saying also in Kashmir. They say dialogue is better than deadlock, and that's what people are saying. That yes, it's a relief, but there was lot of. I have not seen people getting scared to this extent, given the fact that they have seen so much in the last 36 years.
And what is your sense? I mean, obviously, we reached this situation because of what happened in Pahalgam.
Mm.
That tourists from different parts of the country had come to visit Kashmir. And what is your sense? I mean, would it be safe now for ordinary people to visit, because they took the central government's promises that the ecosystem of terror had been crushed pretty seriously, and some of the testimonies that came from the victims as well as their relatives suggested that they took the government's promises very seriously, and that's why they were in Kashmir. So what do you see happening in the next few weeks? I mean, we do have a situation where the terrorists responsible for the brutal killings in Pahalgam have not been apprehended or neutralized so far. So, how would you assess the security situation, post this ceasefire now?
See, Amit, it's a very tricky question because we have to bring in the media information warfare in this entire narrative of normalcy. When people say that Kashmir is normal, you have to actually analyze the ground situation, whether it is really normal. If you read that piece that I wrote, before Pahalgam, there were a lot of things happening in the Pir Panchal. Rahul will be aware that a lot of things happened in Pir Panchal range, a lot of things happened in the Jammu region, which were otherwise considered very peaceful. And you are aware of the attacks, which were on, of course, not on the civilians, but as a society, as a civil society, Kashmir is
And there was
vibrant.
that attack on the Gagangir tunnel as well.
Yeah, Sonmarg. Yes. So
Sonmarg,
that's
yeah.
right. I mean, I'm saying as a vibrant civil society in Kashmir, and I grew up in the mid 90s. I know never ever have the Kashmir's civil society endorsed or entertained killings of civilians, whether they are tourists, whether they are pilgrims, they are ordinary visitors, or even ordinary Kashmiris. So whenever any killing happens of the civilians from any state or non-state actor, there has been unequivocal, unapologetic, and unconditional condemnation of that. And that's exactly what happened on the civilian massacre of Pahalgam. But before that, many things had happened and were happening. And the turf war, so to speak, had changed from the valley hinterland to the mountains in Pir Panchal range, which of course includes Poonch and Rajouri. And then you had the Chenab Valley, Kishtawar, Doda, Baruah, and then the Jammu Plains, where you have Samba, Akhnur, and Jammu region. So a lot of things were happening in the last 3 years. So, but the way that media has been controlled, and you saw that, how this was an embarrassing week for the entire television media, how they suppressed information, spread fake news, and even captured cities and towns and ports in their television studios. And that is where this narrative becomes a very problematic, when you feed lies and then get sort of a trap in a trap where you start believing in your own propaganda and lies. So coming back to your question, that what lies ahead, I think unless that elephant in the room, which is the main issue, I think if that is not addressed, your narratives will not resolve thing. And you saw what happened and how this is a very fragile region, and if one incident can take two countries to war. So that's why I think a lot of thinking needs to be done, and this rhetoric has to give place to reason, and deadlock has to give place to dialogue. And unless that happens, I don't see much change happening, because this cycle will keep repeating in some other form.
Rahul, I want to bring you in here. What Gowhar is saying is, I think, needs probably a separate discussion. The role of the media and the kind of stuff actually we saw on the television, in television studios, is shocking. You've been a veteran journalist, Rahul, and you've seen so many things. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that side of things too much. I also wanted to inform those who are watching, is that Trump has just put another post on Truth Social in which he has complimented the leaders of India and Pakistan, and he's promised a big trade to the leaders of these great countries. So clearly he sees this as a success for himself. And that's the other thing. We in South Asia underestimate how important it is for the West to succeed in securing these band-aid solutions. This we saw during Kargil as well, and now, and on many occasions between India and Pakistan. So one of the questions we have from one of our viewers is from Jay Raman Kal, and he's asking Rahul, will the US have the bandwidth to arbitrate on the talks? They are busy on trade, Ukraine, Palestine, and so on. That's the question for you, Rahul.
Well, I think, as Gowhar said, this trouble in Kashmir has been going on for the last 36 years, since 1989. And at the end of the day, it's our problem. It's not the US's problem. The US has intervened during Kargil, the US has intervened now, but ultimately we have to resolve this. And the way to do it, I mean, I will give you the example of terrorism in Punjab, for example, which also Pakistan was involved in the late 80s, throughout the 90s and up to the early 2000s. We resolved Punjab locally, domestically, and by ourselves. We have, for the last 36 years, deployed the military there. In Kashmir, we have deployed the paramilitaries in Kashmir. We have treated it as a law and order problem and an administrative problem, and not something that requires dialogue with the locals. We haven't really concentrated on solving problems locally. And as Gowhar said, over the last at least 1 year, there have been many indications that the security situation was deteriorating in Kashmir. There were attacks in the Pir Panjal area. There were attacks in which military people, army people had been killed. But because of the situation with the media and compliant media, there was a sense that Kashmir is fine, everything is okay in Kashmir. And then, of course, it all blew up when the Pahalgam strikes took place. So, also, I would add that the US no more has the bandwidth or the influence that it had through the 90s and the 2000s to enforce its decisions and influence on this region. And Trump, I think, is probably looking for a victory because he hasn't had much success in Gaza. He hasn't had much success in Ukraine. And this was a very juicy kind of a crisis in which he probably felt that he could make a difference and be victorious and claim some credit for it and claim some accolades. And I think a lot of people on both sides of the border probably are quite grateful to Mr. Trump for having done this. So, all in all, I think the US's influence in this part of the world is maybe benign, but not effective.
Right. We have another question from Tanya Patel, and she asks that post Pahalgam, India's objective of highlighting Pakistan's terror network and activities in Kashmir, while the ceasefire has brought the two countries to a parity that otherwise did not exist earlier. What are your views? I think that question I'm going to throw to Gowhar in Srinagar. How do you respond to Tanya's question?
See, I think we have to go back to the Simla Agreement. For example, 1972, both countries decided that they will resolve the issue of Kashmir bilaterally. And then when the Indian government put the Indus Waters Treaty of 1960 in abeyance, and Pakistan responded with putting the Shimla Agreement under suspension. So now, with this Pahalgam civilian massacre and the escalation thereafter, what happened is that actually the powers that be, including Iran, Saudi Arabia, China, partly, and then the US finally made a breakthrough. And then this third-party mediation, which New Delhi has always been averse to, has actually come into picture. And it is very interesting to see how things unfold in the future. That there is this ceasefire was actually made possible with intervention from all these countries, more particularly the US. So we have to also see the question of mediation, how far it will go, and how both countries can they come together on a table and be ready for a dialogue on all outstanding issues, whether that be violence on the ground or that be the political issue of Kashmir. It remains to be seen how things unfold. And as Rahul was saying, that Kashmir could be a juicy kind of a issue for Mr. Trump to have United States prowess on the table. But at the same time, I think this is something that needs to be looked at with a lot of depth and a lot of detail, that how New Delhi agreed for a third-party mediation, not only third-party mediation, but so many countries were involved there. Envoys came and held talks. So what happened to the last narrative of last 6 years, that also needs to be asked. I think media, if not the television media, but the right-thinking people who are aware of the things, they need to ask and raise these questions, that whether media narratives can actually make governments escape responsibility.
Well, Gaurav, I think wearing my analyst hat, it would appear that Vance's call to Prime Minister Modi, it was probably the critical one, you know. And I think that the CNN is reporting that some very alarming intelligence was shared with the Indians. So possibly these are kinds of things that influence the decision. And clearly the Americans have a lot of clout with the government of India, just as they do with the government of Pakistan. And we have a very interesting question from Sunil Kumar, and that's a question for you, Rahul. And he asks that given that with given that with Pakistan, there are only bad choices for India, do you think India has gained anything strategically through this attack on their terrorist targets? That's the question from Sunil Kumar.
No, I don't think India has gained strategically. India has gained tactically, most definitely. Because, I mean, first in 2016, there was the so-called surgical strikes after the Uri attack. In 2019, there was the attack after Balakot attack after the Pulwama bombings, in which 40-odd CRPF people were killed. So this is taking the Gulmarg killings just took the Balakot to another level. Now, my question has always been, and nobody's really been able to answer that, is what is Mr. Modi's end game? Mr. Modi's, I mean, from what he's said at electoral rallies and what he said on television, is that he wants to destroy the capability of the Pakistani state, particularly the military and the ISI, to be able to launch terror into India. Now, that is something that is simply undoable. Because even if, for the sake of argument, hypothetically, India were to defeat, in a manner of speaking, which again is virtually impossible, but let's assume that India did manage to prevail over the Pakistani military, the mindset of the Pakistani military is not going to change. And their policy of using terrorists as an extension of their security policy and their security paradigm is not going to change at all. So what is Mr. Modi's end game? And that's where I come back to solving the Kashmir problem domestically, like we did in Punjab. We have to beef up our own security. We have to negotiate a better settlement for Kashmir, whether you give it statehood, whether you, whatever economic measures you introduce there. But we have to deal with it domestically. It is, at the end of the day, India's problem. And we must then, of course, strive. The most sensible way to solve the Kashmir problem is to draw the line where it exists, and then let Pakistan keep what it has, and India keeps what it does, and then we go our way. Because we've had 80 years of this, which basically means almost 4 generations have grown up with the Kashmir problem, and we are nowhere near solving it. So it's about time we did some out of the box thinking and took the bull by the horns and dealt with it locally.
So I have a question for you, Gowhar. One of the things that you mentioned about the fact that terrorists have been active before this also, and these terrorist groups would also be watching what India did after Pahalgam. So do you think that if there is another strike, God forbid, there is another terrorist attack, and from what we know of the region and what's been happening, the likelihood of a strike remains high. It's always there. I mean, one should not be fooled by the so-called normalcy that you see in the Kashmir Valley, or indeed elsewhere in Jammu and Kashmir. So do you think that this, in a sense, this fault line, where you see a response coming if such a thing happens, you think this is something which can be, which can pose a problem in the days and weeks ahead?
See, I mean, this is a problem for the last 36 years in particular. But if you go back politically, it's a problem since 1947, and this problem, as Rahul said, will not go away just because you will have a narrative that it has been resolved or normalcy has been achieved, and what are the indicators of normalcy. So one problematic area has been to sell normal tourism or normal pilgrimages as signs of normalcy, which has always been a problematic discourse. Second is that Pakistan as is a sort of a stakeholder in this entire narrative, and they have the capacity and wherewithal to do whatever they want to at their time and place of choosing, and that's what has happened over the last 36 years. So unless that that dialogue does not happen only bilaterally, but it has to happen first between Islamabad and Delhi, that there is an issue which needs to be resolved, and then there is an aspirational issue of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and these are to be addressed simultaneously. You cannot have a solution where you think that you have a solution because you can contain a certain or distort a story through violence, any kind of violence or any kind of force that you're using. You just shut media, you just gag media and do not make it happen that the narratives come out, which are the people's narratives. If you put a hand on that, if you put a foot and then think that everything is resolved, that we have seen that it's not resolved in that way. Second important thing is what happens next. Is there a chance? Of course, I mean this will keep on happening unless you now have a new problem of Indus Waters Treaty, for example. And if you have read the statement that India still says that it has been put in abeyance, so that means the issue is there. It needs to be resolved. What happens and how the other side will respond to this? So these are some questions. I was reading one of the questions by someone, that what Pahalgam means. Has it sort of increased Islamophobia in mainland India? We also have to go back that what happens also in the mainland India. What has been the treatment of the minorities? That is a question that also needs to be addressed.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that we like the issue of the media narratives. I think this will need separate treatment, and there are a number of other questions. And there's one question for you, Gowhar,
Mhm.
and Hannah John is asking this question: is there still room for back channel diplomacy amidst such responses? It hasn't so far. And also, do you think there is a need to revisit the frameworks that currently guide India's cross border counter terror operations, especially in politically sensitive regions?
See, I mean, what has happened in Kashmir in the last 6 years, Rahul? I think we need to understand that in these last 6 years, that everybody has spoken about Kashmir. For example, the issue of Kashmir has been spoken at the UN by Imran Khan. The issue of Kashmir has been spoken in the media narratives in mainland India. Every political party has spoken about Kashmir, but who have been absent in this entire narrative of last 6 years is the people of Jammu and Kashmir, are the stakeholders of Jammu and Kashmir. Their voices have been choked, and that is the thing which is like from the ground. Any dialogue will not be successful unless you speak to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And by people of Jammu and Kashmir, I mean all the voices of people of Jammu and Kashmir that need to be taken on board, whether it is any minority in Jammu and Kashmir, whether they are from the majority community, and the civil society in Kashmir, and all the political groups, not only those who agree with you. So unless that happens, that dialogue has been missing, and there has been this deadlock. You see, for example, the central mosque in Jammu and Kashmir, it has been kept silent for more than, like in last 6 years, it has remained shut for almost 5 years or more. No Eid prayers, no Shab Barat, no Shab Qadr, nothing is being allowed. Even the mandatory Friday prayers. So you have to see where there's a gap. The gap is that minus Kashmiris, everybody talks about Kashmir. So that question needs to be addressed.
Well, I mean, here is a good voice from Kashmir, and that is yours, Gowhar. Good to hear these views from you. I'm going to ask Rahul now. Rahul, you have followed defense matters very closely. You understand tactics, weapons. You've written on a lot for Jane's on all these issues. How would you assess the encounters that India and Pakistan have had for the last 4 days? Is it that this face of warfare has changed? Is it that drones and air to surface missiles or surface to surface missiles, these will play a larger role in any warfare that might happen in future?
Absolutely, the face of warfare has changed. There's more technical wizardry, to put it very simply, than the old-fashioned slanging it out on the ground. And this basically, for both sides, without going into too much detail, was a sort of a standoff war. It was a war conducted through drones. It was a war conducted through missiles, and of course, it was a war conducted through propaganda on the social media, which is also a very important aspect of war. So in this case, India's wizardry, India's technical prowess did, it seems, at least for as a cursory examination, seems to have been more superior than that of Pakistan. For example, India's S-400 anti-air defense, anti protection shield that we acquired from Russia performed extremely well. And a lot of the incoming drones and a lot of the incoming missiles from Pakistan were neutralized by the S-400 air defense system. Uh, Conversely, India's attacks by drones and by missiles seem to have, again, in the fog of war, it's not very clear what actually happened. I think it will be clear in the next few weeks and next few months. But India did manage to penetrate Pakistan's defenses. And according to some reports, it did manage to damage the HQ-9, which is the equivalent, a lesser equivalent of the S-400 in Lahore. So, to answer your question very simply, that this was a standoff a conflict, and future conflicts are going to be more and more technologically based. But the one question that will remain unanswered for the moment, and I think it is incumbent on India to do so, is to clear the air over how many of the Indian Air Force fighters actually went down in these attacks. There have been various reports about two, three, four Indian fighters have gone down, of which maybe two, maybe three were the newly acquired French Rafale fighters.
And
Uh,
let
I think
and I think we should add here is that there's no confirmation of this from the government of India.
there's no confirmation of it from the government of
But
India. There is a
Reuters has
lot of
reported this. Reuters has reported two or three, if I'm not
Reuters
wrong.
is reporting two or three. In fact, it quotes some US congressman as saying that at least two, if not three, went down. It's quoting in one report in CNN, there was an official from Dassault, which manufactures the Rafale, as saying that this is the first Rafale that's been shot down by a Chinese fighter operated by the Pakistanis. So again, I think there is a lot that needs to be cleared up. And I think it is incumbent on the Indian side to clear up this fog. But I suspect that given the way the media operates and given the way the government operates, that it'll be a long time before the facts of this situation eventually emerge.
And what is your sense? And this is something which you did refer to earlier. I mean, what is the big picture here? I mean, if the effort or if the message was to change Pakistan's behavior, its support for these terrorist groups, do you think that Operation Sindoor has succeeded in that?
Short answer, no. I think it's temporarily allayed. I don't think we've changed the policy of the Pakistan Army, but then again, that's a very complex question because then you move into the Pakistan Army Chief General Munir and his jihadi outlook and jihadi mentality. But I don't think we have managed to change Pakistan. We have probably put Pakistan on notice. And like after Balakot, there haven't been any major strikes. I mean, Balakot to Pahalgam was a period of about 6 years. Again, I'll refer back to history because I think a lot of the Kashmir problem is majority of it is history and very little of it is reality as it exists today. But after the 71 war, we had a period of about 20, 25 years of relative peace as far as Pakistan was concerned. So after Balakot, we had 6 years when there were no major terrorist attacks. Of course, there were terrorist attacks in Uri, in Poonch, in the Pir Panjal area. But relatively, it was calm. There was no Pahalgam kind of attack. So I don't know when the next Pahalgam attack, if at all, it's going to happen. I hope it doesn't. But there's a strong possibility that such an attack is likely to occur because the army is now, not only is it part of its policy, but now it's really peeved. And to my mind, the predominant community in the army is the Punjabis, and the Punjabis don't take to humiliation very sportingly.
Right. There's one question I want to take from Sivasankaran V. And this is a question I want you to address, Gowhar. And it is international support for India waning in terror incidents post 2008? If so, why?
I think world is increasingly busy with larger conflicts, as we all are aware that there's a Ukraine war going on, and Russia is involved there, and entire Europe, NATO, and then you have a bigger escalation happening in Gaza between Israel and Palestine, and there have been large scale killings. More than 50,000 people are dead, and the world is not even paying attention to an issue like Palestine. And when it comes to countries accusing each other of terrorism, there has been a lot of accusation from the other side that what happens in Balochistan, for example, or what happens in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and they are accusing foreign hand in those incidents. So it is like when international community looks at these things, they have to not only to talk to one side or take one narrative as they will have to sift fact from fiction, that what exactly is happening. And that's why the international community will have to also think about their partnerships. For example, if we see China and Pakistan, their Christophe Jaffrelot refers to them in his book as all weather friends. And China has an investment in Pakistan which runs through Balochistan and also parts of the territory Kashmir that is under their administration or they're under control. So you have to see the CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or the One Belt, One Road initiative, or Belt Road initiative, and then bilateral relations between different countries. How Iran sees Pakistan, how Turkey sees Pakistan. So world is not that it is we live in a world where morality, for example, moral compasses do not count, or human rights violations do not matter much. What matters is interest. Interest between countries, whether that's business interest, whether there is strategic interest. So if you're doing business with a particular country, you ignore a lot of things. So that is what is happening overall in the world. So a lot of people know what is happening in Palestine, but still they are not able to do anything because there are interests with Israel. And similarly with Ukraine, everybody knows what is happening in Ukraine, but the world is divided. So I think that applies the same, the same yardstick has to be applied in this case as well. There are a lot of issues, a lot of nuance, a lot of narratives, and the internal and bilateral relations between countries. Unfortunately, international relations are not a moral play. This is all about strategic and bilateral economic interest.
I'm now going to take one question, Rahul. That's for you. It's from Akash B. And Akash B is asking us, is the threat of nuclear escalation making countries more cautious or dangerously overconfident that things won't go too far?
Well, that's a very tricky question to answer for the simple reason that I think a lot of the world just does not seem to realize the fact that here are two nuclear capable countries who are banging away at each other on a daily basis with artillery guns, with small arms fire, with drones, with missiles. And let's not forget that the red lines, Pakistan has a first use policy, India has a no first use policy. But these things are very flexible and can change. So I think the world is very concerned, and I think the Pakistani army would probably be at one level be pleased that the Kashmir issue is back on the table again. And one reason that the Kashmir issue becomes very critical and extremely crucial is nuclear weapons. I mean, Kashmir is referred to as a nuclear flashpoint between the two sides. And I mean, I'm just going out on a limb and I'm saying that, the loan that the Pakistanis got from the IMF, the tranche of $1.3 billion that they just got on the, I think the last Mediation agreement.
Yeah, we can hear you and see you. Go ahead, Rahul. Yeah, go ahead,
Oh,
Rahul. Yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry, can you?
Yeah, we can
Sorry.
hear you and see you. Go ahead.
Again, I'm going out on a limb, but I think one of the reasons that they were successful in getting their tranche for the IMF was because of their nuclear weapons. I mean, Pakistan has been blackmailing the world for the last, since 1999, for the last 25, 26 years with its nuclear weapons. And the West and also the IMF, I think, would be very wary of Pakistan, broke Pakistan, going renegade with nuclear weapons. And, awash with militants, awash with an Islamic army, awash with a very disturbed region. So I think one of the reasons that the IMF loan was sanctioned in a hurry is because they don't want to see chaos happening. And that is something that the Pakistanis are very good at. They're extremely good poker players. They have a very weak hand, but they play an excellent game of poker, and they've been doing it for the last, ever since the Soviets came into the Americans. As the Soviets came into Afghanistan in 1979.
Right.
So the answer to your question is nuclear weapons are a currency which is increasingly being exploited. And Kashmir is one of the flashpoints as far as spending that currency is concerned.
Right. We have one question from Sanju V. Sanju Y. And that I think it seems to be directed at you, Gowhar, or that you could be able to answer it. And he asks, in the light of recurring tensions along the LOC, to what extent can existing ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan serve as a foundation for long-term conflict resolution in Kashmir?
See, I just want to go back to what Mr. Rahul said a while ago, and I have a slight disagreement with his argument when he said that after 2019 there was a period of calm, or so to speak, lull. I don't agree with this because the facts on the ground, are otherwise, speak otherwise. Just because we don't talk about them does not mean that they do not exist. For example, you had 2016 Uri attack, and immediately after there was attack which New Delhi claimed as surgical strike. So it was kind of sold as that this will be the end, and this is the now the new norm has been set. If an attack takes place, there will be a retaliation. So what happened in 2000? Then the 2019 a bigger attack took place. So then again there was Operation Bandar from New Delhi. So then it was said that now everything will stop. But 2019, as you know, it was a clampdown in Kashmir. The August 5 thing happened, and entire Kashmir there was no communication for 1 year. And immediately after, there was COVID, which was, 2020. And then it took 1 year.
God, just to say that we are going to be running out of time soon, so I think let's try and address Sanju V's wise question directly.
I'm coming. I mean, I'm coming to that.
Yeah.
So I think then after 2021, 22, when entire world started getting back to some semblance of normalcy economically and otherwise, but everything was happening in during. If you search for the last 3-4 years, what was happening in Pir Panchal, more than 60 armed personnel of the Indian Army, including majors and including JCOs, including para commandos, had been killed. So there was a lot of activity happening, but there was not a lot of focus put on it because nobody was reporting it as aggressively, or there were no discussions happening. So coming to this question in the light of recurring tensions along the LOC, to what extent can existing ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan serve? I don't think this agreement will serve as a final solution because we saw November 2003 ceasefire, then there were violations again, and it was recently during the Galwan clashes, it was kind of renewed, and then this thing happened. I also think the water war Apart from the nuclear thing, I think the water war is going to be very critical in the times to come. If you see the Indus Waters Treaty, it's a big dispute. I think we need to pay attention to this, for the low riparian states. And what is the agreement? And China has the Brahmaputra, control over the Brahmaputra. I think we need to address those aspects as well. That what are the future conflicts going to be about?
Rahul, we have a question from Vivek Kumar, and he's saying government has said that currently there is a ceasefire understanding and not an agreement. I think that the term understanding to stop firing on land, sea, and air was used by the foreign secretary as opposed to a ceasefire. I think there's some semantics here. How do you see this semantics? Because the government is trying to stress that we should not try to use the word ceasefire. How do you see this?
Yeah, I agree. It's what I would call a cessation of hostilities, and it's not a ceasefire, because a ceasefire is a formal agreement with penalties and all kinds of codicils attached to it. So this is a cessation of hostilities, with both sides deciding not to exchange fire either on land or on sea or in the air. So it's not formally a ceasefire. So your the person who's asking the question is absolutely right.
Right. And I know we don't have much time left, but I'm going to take one or two more questions as we can. And one question which I may be doing a little bit of injustice, but it's a good question. But it's from somebody who's already asked the question, but I'm going to allow it. And Hannah John is asking, and this is something which both of you can answer, maybe briefly. Given the increasingly polarized media on both sides, how can young people who often grow up with conflict driven narratives be engaged in building a less adversarial imagination of the other side? Gowhar, first to you.
I think it's a brilliant question by Hannah John. I think, as I said in the beginning, that the last week has been an embarrassing week for television journalism in India. And even those voices which are otherwise considered secular, liberal, or credible have actually gone to levels where they have captured pilots, they have invaded cities and ports, and it has shown them in very bad light. I think for one, we need to stop watching television and actually go back to that old school journalism where people actually go to the ground and take voices from the ground and then report, even if it takes time. Don't fall for these clickbaits, and don't. I think we need to go back to original journalism of news gathering and fact checking, and only follow those websites and follow those news channels who are credible and who give kind of weightage to facts and do not fall for rhetoric. That would be my short answer.
I think that's excellent advice for anybody who's watching or listening, because one of the problems that we all faced during these 4 5 days was whom to trust and whom not to trust. And now over to you, Rahul, for an answer to Hannah's question.
Well, I agree entirely with what Gowhar is saying, and I think one of the biggest travesties of modern life is actually social media, because the kind of exaggerations that have manifested themselves on social media. I mean, they had the Indian Army marching to Lahore, they had the Indian Army marching to Islamabad, and you didn't really know what was real and what was not. And I think it eventually boils down to what people really want to believe and are asking to believe. So if there are some people who want to see the Indian Army marching towards Lahore, then they will believe those and then they will retweet them. So I think, as Gowhar was saying, old-fashioned journalism needs to be resuscitated. But in my advancing years, I don't think it's likely to be. And I think social media is here to stay, and we have to learn how to live with it. But it's going to be a travesty, and it's going to be the death of all of us.
Right. I think we have a few minutes left. So, Gowhar, I'm going to ask you to put your thinking cap on. As someone who watches, politics in Delhi, politics in Islamabad, politics around closely, what do you think the Kashmiri is thinking now? That we have a break for some time, that this episode in this larger continuing serial is over? Is that what they're thinking? What is the ordinary person on the street, or people whom you talk to and whom you trust and whose insights you take on board. What do you think that person is telling you?
Yeah, one thing which I've noticed in the last 6 years is that even people who you placed faith in or trust in, not many people are speaking their heart out. It's become very dangerous, sort of very difficult to get to the bottom of the story, because people do not speak up, as they used to. So there's a lot of fear. All they share in common is fear. And second, nobody supports war in Kashmir, because they know that ultimately, when the war happens or the big escalation takes place, they call themselves grass. That when the two big elephants fight, it is the grass that gets trampled over. So, the sense is that they want a dialogue between India and Pakistan, and always Kashmiris, sane Kashmiris, the voices that you trust, they want Kashmir to act as a bridge between India and Pakistan, where both countries act like statesmen, their leaders act like statesmen and talk to each other rather than talk at each other.
Right. And Rahul, what is your sense? I mean, as someone who's watched India and Pakistan closely, who follows, the strategic thinking, tactical maneuvers, and so on and so forth. Uh, are people of India and Pakistan going to get a break from this hostility, or is it just an interval, rukawat, as they say in Hindi, before something else happens?
I think it's an interregnum. I think the chance and possibility of changing people's minds on either side of the border are fairly remote. It is a generational thing, and there was hope that the new generation on both sides of the line of control would take a more sensible and a mature attitude, but it seems that emotions are running high even there. There was a certain amount of camaraderie in the older generation that has now passed on, and that unfortunately has been replaced by an animosity, dislike, hatred. So I am very skeptical about the possibility of India and Pakistan actually making friends and moving together, which is a shame, because together I think we could put ourselves together and really be world beaters because of the enterprise on either side of the border. But unfortunately, politics intervenes and ruins everything.
Well, before we go, there's and one more question from Saptadeep Samanta, and he's asking, I have a question to the speakers about the authenticity of the news circulating about INS Vikrant attacking on Karachi ports, and PIB fact check also didn't confirm it. I think that we can tell, on behalf of all of you that, there's no such attack happened. And I would also say that, many of the fact checking things that came out, spoke more about incidents which, may have happened or may not have happened. But I think many of the absurd sort of statements made by Indian television channels, went unchecked. So this is really a danger. And is there anything we can do about it, Rahul? I mean, what do we watch and what do we not watch? And very quickly.
No, I mean this incident of Vikrant was mentioned by a very responsible and very well established TV channel, and in fact they raised a lot of panic on I think it was on Thursday night when they said that there has been an attack on Karachi and Karachi has been blockaded by the Indian Navy. So I really have no advice to give, because I really watch Indian television, because it's the news you get is mostly inaccurate and rhetoric, and it suits one side of the political spectrum than the other. And I mean, I think one must exercise one's judgment.
And again, very quickly, Gowhar, are people in Srinagar, do they watch a lot of Noida-based television channels?
Not really. I mean, as you know, Kashmiris have good media habits. They go back to old school. They also listen to Voice of America, which is now defunct. Voice of Germany, BBC. They also do a fact check on their own. But yes, I mean, social media is a reality. There's a lot of happening. People have mobile phone screens, and they also sometimes fall for this. But I think there's not a lot of appetite for television viewing. And I think we all of us must who believe in storytelling, the art of storytelling and the power of truth telling, that never let facts become a casualty in and don't let emotions take over.
Well, I think that we probably have to end it here. But thank you so much to both Rahul Bedi and Gowhar Geelani for putting these difficult issues in perspective, because these things are never easy. And really, the conflict has just got over, 12 to 14 hours ago. So this webinar is very timely. And I must also thank, all our participants who asked questions online. And I would like to apologize to some whose questions we couldn't take. But all in all, I think that this is a break. There is a sense of relief in both India and Pakistan that things have ended. There is, whatever you call it, a pause, a stop, a ceasefire, whatever words you want to describe for it. But I know that once when I was speaking to Rahul recently, he was saying, "Oh, there's some, air raid sirens going on in Chandigarh." So, that's the kind of scenario we've just come out of, and one can only hope and pray that the cooler heads prevail, and India, Pakistan, and the region can move on. So, thank you both very much, and thank you for all those who participated in our webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amit, for conducting this. And I think India and Pakistan fight wars, but Kashmiris live wars. That's why they don't want war. Thank you.
Well, we give the last word to Gowhar Geelani. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.